The Sydney Opera House is the symbol of modern Australia, a World Heritage listed masterpiece synonymous with inspiration and creativity. Since opening in 1973, it has been home to many of the world's greatest artists and performances, and a meeting place for matters of local and international significance. But the history of performance on this land stretches back thousands of years before Europeans arrived. For the traditional custodians, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, it was an especially prized location known as Jubagali, a place to eat, sing, dance and share stories with each other. Today the land is also known as Bennelong Point, named after Wulwe Bennelong, a senior Eora man at the time of the first British settlement in Australia in 1788. Kidnapped by the first governor of New South Wales, Arthur Phillip, Bennelong served as an intermediary between the British and Eora people. In return, he was given a hut in which to live out his years on the tidal island at the tip of the point that now bears his name. Bennelong's hut eventually gave way to the construction of Fort Macquarie, and at the turn of the 20th century, the fort was converted into a tram depot. By the middle of the 20th century, a recognition that Australia needed a world-class home for culture and the performing arts had gathered real momentum. More than anyone, the Premier of New South Wales, Joseph Carl, along with Eugene Goosens, conductor of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and director of the Conservatorium of Music, were responsible for this momentum becoming a reality. For Goosens, Sydney's need for a grand cultural and music centre had long been obvious. He could not have hoped for a more encouraging supporter than Carl. In 1956, with Bennelong Point chosen as a location, a worldwide competition for a national opera house was launched. 220 entries would arrive by the closing date, and shortly after, on January 29, 1957, Premier Joe Carl announced that the winner was Design 218 by little-known Danish architect Jørn Utzon. Unique amongst the competition entries, it placed the concert halls side by side, their roofs extending out over the end of Bennelong Point, bringing to mind Sydney's cliffs and sails. It was a strikingly sculptural response, fusing modern and ancient architecture in a work of art built for the performance of works of art. Entirely financed by public lottery, it took architects, engineers, construction workers, politicians, and most fundamentally the people of Australia to realise the project over a period of 16 years. Initially, Utzon and the engineers from Arup and Partners struggled to find a solution to the construction of the shells that captured not only the spirit of the design, but could also house the complexity of a working building. After more than 3 years, Utzon had a now famous epiphany that would solve what had become a particularly difficult engineering problem. Utzon's breakthrough was to derive each of the shells from the constant and universal form of the sphere. This one decision solved a multitude of problems at once. It captured the essence of the original sketch while allowing the building blocks to be prefabricated with comparative ease. Many details comprise the extraordinary story of the building's construction. The transformation of the geometry from sketch to the timeless principle of the sphere was just the beginning. 10,000 labourers, carpenters, electricians and engineers would work to finish the house between 1958 and 1973. Not one death was recorded on the site, despite the absence of safety harnesses, as men crawled over the superstructure or rode the crane hooks hundreds of feet into the air. But by 1965, disputes and disagreements had seriously fractured the project's leadership of architects and engineers. A change in government had also brought a change in political will, personified by the newly appointed Minister for Public Works, Davis Hughes. Hughes criticised Utzon's approach and refused to pay fees due to the architect until, in desperation, he was forced to close his office. Unable to pay the salaries of his staff, Utzon wrote to Hughes, "You have forced me to leave the job." Within hours of receiving the letter, Hughes replied to Utzon that he had accepted it as the architect's resignation. Despite public outrage at the treatment of Utzon, he would leave Australia never to return or see with his own eyes his masterpiece finished. In Utzon's wake, alongside Arup and Partners, a consortium of 3 Australian architects, Peter Hall, Lionel Todd, and David Littlemore, were tasked by Hughes with completing the building. But like Utzon before him, Hall faced enormous challenges, including an absence of approved designs with which to proceed.